Be sure to check down below. I made chapters for everything. This is kind of a long video. There's a lot to unpack in the synthesizer, and I'm going to do a shootout between the Arturia SQ80 and my ESQ-1 hardware at the very end. So stick around for that, or just skip to it right now if that's all you're here to check out. Hey everybody, welcome back to Absolute Audio. I'm Luke. Thanks for stopping in. I've been trying to shoot this video for several days. I was really excited to see that Arturia just released the SQ80. I don't see that as part of their V collection, not just yet. I did purchase it as a standalone synthesizer, and so this isn't a paid promotion or anything. I've been purchasing Arturia synthesizers since V Collection 3, so that's probably been 10 or 15 years at least. A good friend of mine turned me on to Arturia, like I said, 15 years ago. I think I had the ARP 2600, maybe the Moog modular that they developed with Dr. Moog, and I just thought it was amazing. That's when I fell in love with synthesizers and the sounds that they were creating. I came from a guitar background, and I found that I was kind of repeating myself in my songwriting, and with a synthesizer, the sounds I made were completely brand new. They basically had never been done before because of the number of parameters and things you could adjust. It was just impossible to kind of recreate some of the things, some of the sounds that you would hear unless you saved your presets, which is something that Arturia has made possible on a lot of synthesizers that otherwise would not have it, such as the Moog modular or the mini Moog. The SQ80, in this video, I'm going to do a shootout between the Arturia SQ80 and my ESQ-1, which is right back here on the rack, if you can see that under the lights. Excuse me, still have a respiratory infection, so I'll try and edit out most of the coughs and the wheezing, so please bear with me. Now, before you get too excited and say, well, the ESQ-1 is one synthesizer and the SQ80 is another one, that's not entirely the case. The sounds are relatively the same. The ESQ-1 came first, I believe it was 1986, and it had 32 waveforms, unless I'm mistaken. 8 voices of polyphony, 8-bit, sampled wavetables. The SQ80, which is the synthesizer we're going to take a look at today from Arturia, came out a few years later. 8-voice polyphony, 8-bit samples. I think it had 200 waveforms or 75 waveforms. I'm not sure, depending on what you read. My research says it had 75. The SQ80 has, from Arturia, has 222, I think. It has the hidden waveforms from the ESQ1 and the SQ80 all in one, plus trans waves, which I think were part of the VFX. Anyway, long story short, they're basically the same synthesizer with very minor differences. The filter chip is the same as a CEM3379. Supposedly that's the filter that's in the Prophet VS. The sound chips were the same. So just what I'm going to do later in the video is do a shootout between the ESQ1 and the SQ80 software synth. I'm going to play a MIDI file, and I'm going to load the factory banks from the ESQ1, which are already in this hardware synth back here. I'm going to load that into the SQ80 V from Arturia, because you can import system exclusive patches, and play a MIDI file, and you can decide for yourself if it's worth spending the money. I got mine on sale, an introductory price for $50. I think it goes up to like 100 or 150, and I'm sure that hopefully down the road, when they have some more software to release, they will include it in the V collection. A couple other things I wanted to say about Arturia. Why I'm a fan of theirs is because they model the classic synthesizers that we all grew up with. Recently they put out a DX7. Everyone's heard of DX7. Everyone has heard of Jupiter 8. Everyone has heard, I don't know, probably a 2600 at this point, because they've been remanufactured by I don't know how many different companies. But the sounds that you're used to hearing and are very familiar with, they've recreated. The graphics are identical. The sounds are, if they're not identical, they're close enough to where my ears can't tell a difference. So that's good enough for me. And not only do they take a synthesizer that has a fixed set of parameters, they've built on top of it and made it even better, such as the Moog Modular. You can save your presets. You can add effects that weren't there before. The Mini Moog has effects that weren't there before. The SQ80 has 15 effects in 4 different slots, so you can use 4 at a time, 15 to pick from. The original didn't have that. It has an arpeggiator. It has expanded polyphony. It has a modulation mixer where you can combine 2 modulation sources and multiply them against each other and just completely mangle the sound even more than what you otherwise could with the wave shaping. So there's a lot to go through. It's a lot to unpack. So down in the description there are chapters. I'm going to ramble on a little bit about why I like Arturia and synthesizers, but if you want to jump right into the sounds, everything is indexed for you. So let's get into it and check it out. Okay, so here it is. We've got the SQ80 V from Arturia. There are 3 tabs here on the plugin. There's a hardware tab, a synthesis tab, and an effects tab. We're going to start with the hardware tab, and it does look exactly like the hardware. It looks very much like the ESQ-1 that's behind me. It looks a lot like an actual SQ80, even down to the floppy drive right over here. That's another difference that the SQ80 had over the ESQ-1 was a floppy drive, so you could access more preset banks and more sequencer notes. That did have an expanded sequencer over its predecessor. So other than that, a lot of the synthesizer is accessible from the front panel. You can see you've got 3 oscillators right here in the front. You don't have the drop down menu. You can only scroll through them from where you are. And then you have the filter and some of the parameters that control each one. The octave, the tuning, the level, fine tuning on each of the oscillators, and then the 2 modulation sources that are affecting your filter. Essentially, you have a lot of access just on the front panel, not nearly as much as what's on the 2 or the middle panel, the synthesis panel rather. There is an arpeggiator on the front here, and I'm going to play that for you just so you can get a feel for it. It's not the most flexible arpeggiator, but the original didn't have one, so I'm not going to complain. It is really cool. The only complaint I do have about the ARP is that it's only on the front panel. Most of the time I find myself in the synthesis panel, this middle tab, and I can't control the ARP there. So it might be somewhere, and I've been staring at it for 2 days and didn't push the button. But I've got a bass sound pulled up here. You think, all right, well that's great. Let's see what we can do. We've got 3 octaves, and then we've got 7 different patterns: random, up, down, 2, down, reverse, and ordered. So let's just try random with 3 octaves. Actually, let's do up, down, 1, because that'll work good with 3 octaves here. And then, of course, you've got your hold button, so you can take your hands off the keyboard, cycle through the wavetables if you like. Really dynamic, adds some dimension and depth to your bass lines. You can turn the hold button on, cycle through the waveforms. See, I cycled through the waves. turn the resonance up, move the filter, and the sound was just complete different. To me, it was completely different, just night and day. That adding some dynamics and otherwise, you know, it could be a boring bass line. That's a quick way to liven things up. So there's a lot going on the front panel. If this was the only interface you had, you could still get a lot done. So let's move on to the synthesis panel. All right, this is the synthesis panel. This is where a lot of the fine tuning and the modulation happens. Again, there's just a lot of depth to this instrument that the original didn't have. If you want to set and program a sound on an SQ80 or an ESQ-1, there's not a whole lot of menu diving. It's not too bad, but to have everything in front of you at once makes your life a lot easier. So I'm just going to start with pre-made sound here, not a pre-made sound, a default pattern, just a saw wave, and I'm going to go through it one by one. So we've got one oscillator here. I can change the octave up or down 2 to 4 octaves. I can left click to adjust my pitch, or right click to do a slow adjustment. So double click to reset. Right click will do a very fine adjustment. You can do it on like the fine knob, the levels. See, that's a full range of motion there. And only turn it down a little bit. So you've got a drop down showing your waveforms, the SQ80. I think that's the original 75. Includes drum sets. I think there's 5 of them here. Trans waves. I'm not sure if those came from the VFX. The VFX was an Ensoniq synthesizer. I tried loading a system exclusive bank from VSX into this and it did not work, but the ESQ-1 did. Just hear one of the trans waves. And once I select one, I can just give it a single click. But then I gotta hit X to close it out. And then once I've got it pulled up, I can cycle through it. It's called Alien. If we go back to the first tab, there's Alien right there, so I can cycle through it. Don't have the drop down, but I can cycle through them. Let's go back to Alien. I'm going to copy that with this little button right here. Copy it to DCO2. And then I'm going to change that one to, say, a square wave. Close it out. Turn the volume up. For whatever reason, DCA1 defaults, well, when you load up the default patch, it defaults to almost about 80% of full volume. DCAs 2 and 3, copy this to 3, do not. They come in at 50% volume. So I'm going to turn them up so you can hear them. You can hear the difference in the dynamics happening over here in the bottom right hand corner. The velocity, the keyboard, everything is being affected. Down at the bottom of the oscillators, you have your voices. You can make it to a monophonic, and you also have unison. So that's really nice. And if you ever get confused about where you're at or what a button does, you notice the bottom left-hand corner of the plugin will say right here, it says unison on when enabled. All voices play simultaneously. So without it, I can play a chord. I play this chord here, and now I turn on unison. You can hear a little bit of detuning. If I make it mono, it's only going to play one at a time, no matter how hard I try. So the unison's nice. All 8 voices. Let's see if we can recreate a unison sound just with some sawtooth waves. And I'm just going to detune a little bit. Use my right click. Sounds nice, if you ask me. I think it sounds great. The filter right here in the middle have, I think this is the SQ80 filter. I was under the impression I could change it, but that's actually the envelopes, which we'll get into those after a bit. But the filter, I believe it's a 4-pole, just low pass filter. You can modulate it. These little circles right here, I'm going to talk about those. Just about every destination can have 2 sources affecting it at once. If we use the filter here on that same sound, it's pretty nice. And apparently that's the same filter from the Prophet VS, so a little bit difference in the price point there. We can assign this envelope to the frequency of the filter. You see these 2 little circles right here. Another complaint, I hate to complain about it, but these 2 little circles, you don't click on the circle. You have to mouse over it, and then this plus sign appears, and then you click on the plus sign. So I'm going to modulate the filter cutoff with envelope 1. And I have to turn it up, the amount, and turn it all the way up to 100%. So I'm going to do 50. Just like that. If I go backwards, it's going to work backwards. So that's fun. If I move it to MSEG, I don't know what the MS stands for off the top of my head, but EG is usually envelope generator. I can loop it, and then there's some presets here, which makes it pretty fun. And the rate is set, it defaults to hertz, but we can sync it and then move it to our tempo. Whatever the tempo of our session is that we're working in, it's going to fall right into place. So just like the SQ80 or the ESQ-1, there's 4 envelopes, each with the same set of options. There's also a DADSR, so you can add some delay to your standard attack, decay, sustain, release envelope, and then the 4th envelope is your master volume. I believe that defaults to right up here. So while we're looking at modulation, I do want to point out one other thing. If you can see it, this probably isn't a good way to show it. Let me move to the LFO right over here on the right hand side. We've got this big triangle. I'm going to also modulate. I'm going to turn off the envelope modulating the filter. You got to click on the plus sign. You see filter cutoff source 1. I can either shut it off, leave it there, shut it off. Can't really see the power buttons. That's something else on the effects page. Maybe it's just the angle that my monitor is setting at, but it's kind of hard to see. Move that to none. I'm going to go to my LFO. I'm going to set it to the LFO. And already it's alive. I can change the rate with the slider. The slider's kind of small. You only get a small bit of real estate to grab the rate on all these sliders, the volume, the rate, the amp of the LFO. And again, you can put it to sync with your session, so you're locked into your tempo grid. You do have an amplitude for the LFO. You've got 3 LFOs, just like the hardware synthesizers. And really, I mean, the sky's the limit. You can create, traditional pad sounds. Layer some effects on it, and it's really gonna sound like just about anything that you want it to. The Ensoniq, these synthesizers had a reputation for sounding very 80s and cheesy, and you hear some of that from the Shootout that I do, and some of the sound demos that I do later. They can sound like just about anything else. I will point this out. You notice that when I go over LFO2, the knob right above, I can't take my mouse off of it, but right above there you can see the pan knob is flashing green. That's because LFO2 is modulating the pan knob above it. If I go over LFO1, if you look back on the filter, the little button that sets the source for the modulation is flashing. If I go to LFO3 and I want to modulate, say the oscillator voices here, LFO3, I'm going to turn it up. Do the same on oscillator 3, and I'm going to turn it down. I'm going to hit a key. LFO3. My mouse over it. I gotta turn up my amplitude. For whatever reason, it was defaulted being flat. When I mouse over it, you can see that it's flashing. When your modulation matrix gets really full and you've got things routed all over the place, you can mouse over things to kind of get an idea of what is going where. Right above the LFO, you've got something very unique where you can take two sources. It defaults to LFO1 with no amount, and then let's say we add LFO3. These are both modulation sources, LFO1 and LFO3. We're going to multiply them. I'm not sure what diff is, divide, sum, lag, or crossfade. Let's sum them together by 50%. You can see the waveform changes quite a bit. I'm going to move up the rate of the LFO3. Maybe not that much. And LFO1, we'll move it up quite a bit. So now they are blended together in this matrix mixer. Now they're all over the place, I believe. Yeah, so right there is mod mixer. So now this mod mixer, let's say we wanted to affect the filter. 2 LFOs in one. I mean, it's just endless. Lastly, we've got a master tune, which apparently is also defaulted to being modulated by LFO3. DCA4 is your amp, and a pan, just a hard pan, your level. All this can be modulated. And here at the bottom, I'll go ahead and show you have up to 16 voices of polyphony. And then undo, your undo history, redo, a panic button, and then this is uniform across the entire V collection. So you've got a panic button, your polyphony, your undo history, brightness, timbre, time, and movement. Let's just maybe start it over. I'm going to copy this to the other oscillators, bring the filter down a little. I'm going to do a very slight modulation of the filter by the LFO. Just enough to where it makes things interesting. Because now I want to go into the effects page. The effects page, again, 15 effects. They sound great. You can run them in parallel or series right down here, and you can turn them on or off. They each have 2 modulation destination buttons that function just like everything on the last page. So what is that? That's 16 sources to use as modulation. You can turn it off or on. And let's just hear what we've got here. You can sync it. You have a filter, you have feedback, you have width. Just put some reverb on it. think they sound nice. You can really really do deep dives into these instruments, modulate your effects, and just have all sorts of fun. If we look at the actual effects, there are 15. You've got your reverb and delay, which we just heard. I haven't heard the tape delay, so let's check that out. Nothing better than mangling a tape delay. You can hear it's got some distortion and saturation to it, which is really cool. And then over here, PS delay. Yeah, don't know what the PS is. I haven't read the manual or anything. I just dove into it and started pushing buttons. That's how I like to learn. You got stereo pan, a parametric EQ, multi-filter, a bit crusher. So if 8-bit is too high fidelity for you, you can always shove it through the bit crusher. A multi-comp, multi-band compressor. Yep. Multi-band compressor. It's got different modes. Regular compressor, overdrive. A phaser, a flanger, and then Juno chorus. So I will say this real quick. It seems like every year Arturia has been gifting things, and I think the most recent one was a Juno chorus plugin. It was free if you were a V collection, excuse me, a V collection member, like you own the V collection. They gave you this plugin, and it sounds phenomenal. And now they're putting it in these synthesizers. They're getting updated, and they have this Juno chorus. They recently did a Roland Juno emulation, and of course it's in there. I got the first one I got for free. It was around Black Friday or Christmas. It was called the Mini Filter, and it was a Moog ladder filter emulation. One year they did an EMT plate reverb. I mean, it's just their go-to effects. They get used on everything that I record, basically. So I'm gonna pull up a bass sound. I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna put that Juno sound on it. That one sounds fun. 90s bass. Go back to the front panel. I'm going to turn on the arpeggiator and then turn on the Juno so you can hear it. I think it sounds phenomenal. I think it's really something. Um, the effects, I mean, there's just some of these sounds combined with the effects. That's what I enjoy about Arturia. You have a 99.9% accuracy of the hardware synth, and then you get the effects on top of it. You get the presets. You get the added ability to edit in depth. In a mix, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a you know, a $4,000 mini Moog that plays one note at a time, or the software version that costs 2% of that same price, and it has, 500 times the 5 times the features or whatever. Not in a dense mix. I don't care who you are. So I'm just going to go through some presets that I've picked out. Something I did want to mention about the Arturia V collection. When I first got into it like 15 years ago, and they still do this, but a lot of their focus was on, the desert island synths, the unicorn synths, the super expensive ones like the Moog Modular or a Jupiter 8. Those are the synthesizers that everyone dreams of. They're not exactly practical. You better have a technician who knows what they're doing and will give you, a friendly repair rate on the maintenance for taking care of a synthesizer that's 40 years old. This ESQ-1 back here, I literally bought it at a yard sale for I think $40, and I had to put about 150 into it to get some keys working and get a new battery and get all the jacks and the pots, not the pots, but the buttons cleaned out and all the contacts and the keys cleaned out. And the guy I bought it from, he knew it was worth something because it was made of metal and it was heavy. It was really heavy compared to something you might buy today. But the point I'm trying to get at here is that with a synthesizer that's $10,000 and has been out of production for 30 years, like a Jupiter or whatever, of course Arturia modeled those to begin with because no one has access to them. But recently they've been emulating synthesizers that are not really one in a lifetime that you even get to see one, let alone purchase one, such as the SQ80 DX7. These are synthesizers that can typically be had for, less than $500 or 40 plus 150 or whatever. I think I got my DX7 for $300. It needed work. It still needs work. That'll be a different video, but it's definitely functional. Definitely still worth $300. But when you have a software version, especially one that can communicate via system exclusive, and you've got the hardware anyway, it's just kind of a no-brainer. So I wanted to mention that because they're not just playing favorites to the synths that are out of touch for 99% of the population. They're focusing on stuff that just has good sound regardless of what kind of reputation it has. I mean, we grew up listening to DX7s and ESQ-1s and these more affordable synthesizers. So So that's some of the sounds. That's a very capable instrument. Definitely worth checking out. I don't know if I would be accurate calling it a great beginner synthesizer. I think that any of them, given enough time, can be learned relatively easily, especially versus a hardware synth. I think that the tooltips that appear at the bottom, the glowing knobs that let you know where your sources and destinations are as far as modulation is concerned, really makes life easier. The last thing I want to do is import some sounds, the ESQ-1 factory settings into the software synth via system exclusive, um, and do a comparison so you can hear both of them side by side. If you want the sound banks, I think there's 40 sounds in the file. It's a system exclusive file. There's a link in the description. It's at my Patreon page, but it's a free download. You don't have to be a member. Just click on the link and you're welcome to download it. If you want to support the channel, I'll appreciate it. It'll allow me to make more content, more sounds in the future. So head over there if you want to get the download. And thanks in advance. So I'll show you how to do the import, and then we'll hear some more sounds. Okay, to import any system exclusive banks, we just go up here to our menu, go to import, and locate it on the computer. Sorry you can't see that. And import it successfully. We go back to our preset browser right here. And right there they are, ESQ-1 system exclusive banks. And I believe there's 40 of them. Yep. So there's the original sounds that came on the ESQ-1. Anything that works on the ESQ-1 will work on the SQ80. Then I get the VFX to work. There's the piano sound. Definitely has its uses in certain places. So if I go back to the browser, right there under all types, they come up. Because they're numbered, they come up in the very beginning. There's one right here, number 28, that so now I'm going to go over into Reaper, and I'm going to play 2 tracks and let you compare the hardware versus the software. All right, well, that's a wrap. Thanks for sitting through this long video. I hope you learned something. If you do, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you'll know when I make my next video. I think I'm going to do the DX7, do a similar shootout with patches, share some system exclusive banks for all the viewers, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks for stopping in.